T minus 20 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is time for Out of the Tunnel for Week 7. We have a stacked show. It is a stacked weekend of games, and so we're excited to break everything down for you guys and get you ready for Week 7 of college football. So, Nick, we're going to throw it over to you first and let you get us started.
Yeah, so sort of a simple question, but with the big week that we have this week, it kind of adds a little mystique to it. So, who do you guys think is under the most pressure to not only win, but just in general this weekend? We got Bama, Michigan, or Oklahoma State.
Slade, I'll let you go first.
So I think who's on the most pressure this under the most pressure this weekend? Yeah, I would say is Bama. I think that they just are have an offense last week without Bryce Young, and it didn't look all that great to start. And so, I mean, it's still an offense coached by Nick Saban, so it's going to be hard to beat that team. But it's definitely got a lot of chatter going in terms of their matchup this week against Tennessee, a highly talented offense with your guys's hopeful Heisman and Hooker. So I think that that's why I would choose Bama to be the team that have the most pressure on them this week.
I'm actually going to go with Oklahoma State. And just for the key reason, it's been very difficult for one-loss Big 12 teams to make it into the playoff. We've seen it before, Oklahoma State last year, but they ended up losing in the Big 12 championship game. But even Baylor, so it's very difficult for any one-loss team to get in. If Alabama loses this week, they still have a very tough schedule ahead. Where if they win out, they can absolutely get in. Michigan, again, if they lose today to Penn State, they still play Ohio State, they still play Michigan State, which gives them trouble. If they can win out, they still have a favorable schedule to look at the committee and say, "Hey, we have one loss, but it was against a very good Penn State team, and we ran the table here. We went undefeated. We were conference champions. If that ends up happening, so I think it's more adverse to Oklahoma State than anybody to get a loss today and then try to still make the college football playoff. Whereas Michigan and Bama, they can have a loss, finish out their schedule strong, and still have a reason or an argument to get into the playoff.
Yeah, actually, both of the things that you guys said were the reasons that I picked this. I also ended up going with Bama on this one, and I wanted to go with OK State for the same reasons that George stated. But the only reason that I went with Bama is because, in my opinion, this isn't a Bama team like we're used to seeing. You know, we heard Saban last year talk about his rebuild year after making the playoffs and not winning it all. And I think that their team this year, especially obviously when Bryce Young isn't on the field, is a big step down from where they were last year. They don't seem like the powerhouse Bama this year. We've seen them have way too many close games with people that they shouldn't have had close games with. This is obviously their toughest test of the year so far, at least in my opinion. Um, and I think that it's a very losable game for Bama. And even though they still have a tough schedule and could still make it in, I think that tough schedule actually makes it worse for them because if you lose this game, you still have other scary games ahead of to look to. Not to mention the fact that you have Georgia, which in my opinion is probably the second best team in this country right now under Ohio State, maybe even competing with Ohio State. I want to see Georgia's offense do a little more. But yeah, that's why I think Bama is most important this week.
Moving on, Slade, we're going to throw it over to you now and get your headline for today.
Yeah, so my headline is Clemson in danger? I think that this is crazy to think that at the beginning of the season, Florida State is a test for Clemson, but we're here this week and they're playing Florida State, and so I just think that based on their previous like 3-4 games here, Clemson they went to Wake Forest and they won in double overtime, and then they won against NC State 2 weeks ago in a matchup that we had all thought that NC State had a good chance at winning that. Ended up being a 10-point loss for NC State there. And Florida State on their schedule had gone in and faced both those teams, and they lost very close battles to both those teams. So I think that this week could definitely be a lot closer than what maybe on paper is stating. And so that's why I just am wondering if you guys think that it's close or if you think Clemson's going to run away with the game.
Nick, we'll
Yeah.
go to you first.
Yeah. So I just happened to be scrolling through FanDuel. I think it was yesterday, and I don't know if it was a mistake when I looked or not, but it only showed Clemson as like 1.5 point favorites. I think it was. It might have been 2.5. I don't know if that still stands. I wanted to check this morning and forgot. But to me, I think that Clemson definitely isn't the team that they want to be and that everybody wants them to be. But I do still think that they're a very good team. But Florida State is also a lot better than what we've seen in previous years. I think this is definitely going to be a challenge for Clemson. I don't know if it's as close as what I've seen on FanDuel wants us to think, but definitely a big test for them. And this very well could be the week that we see them fall.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenging week for Clemson. Listen, I hyped up Florida State and their environment a couple weeks ago when they hosted Wake Forest. I think I overacted a little bit, bought too much into that hype. This is a Florida State team that's reeling. They've had two difficult losses back to back to Wake Forest, and then they lost a tough game to NC State last week, which they were winning. They had every right to go out there and win that game. They just kind of let it slip away late. I did pull up some facts. So Florida State is ranked 25th in total defense in the country. NC State was 16th. We saw what Clemson's offense was able to do to NC State's defense. But Florida State does have a really good offense. They're 23rd in total offense. Wake Forest was 42nd. And again, we saw what Wake Forest was able to do to that defense. I think this is going to be a really high-scoring shootout. Clemson's defense is not what we're used to. It's not the best in the country like we've seen year in, year out before. We talked about that. We talked about how Brett Venables has gone to Oklahoma and how mightily he's struggling there. So I definitely think this can be a close game. I think Florida State can put up a lot of points, but I think Clemson's offense is rolling just a little too much now. And I've doubted them for long enough. I bought on the Florida State for long enough. So this week I'm going to go with Clemson winning at home. Or excuse me, on the road. Clemson's on the road. Moving on.
Hi, Jen.
We're going to look at a little bit of film this week. Put together this video for you guys on Penn State's defense versus Michigan's offense. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to get into Penn State and Michigan with that being our game of the week. I want to look at Penn State's defense and some things they're doing really well, but also some holes they're showing. And the same thing in Michigan in their run and pass game. Both sides definitely have some vulnerabilities, but also both sides play really well at times. I think this will be a great game. But let's get into some of the things that both teams do really well and some things they can improve on. All right, so the first play we're going to look at for Penn State is back in the season opener against Purdue and a simple coverage mistake that they make on the top side of the screen here. So the cornerback at the top of the screen is going to get sent on a blitz here. The strong safety in the black is supposed to come down and cover his man, or at least take that zone, and then the strong safety over the top is supposed to roll over, but it's going to leave this little gap here, but there's still a key mistake that gets made by this strong safety right here. As you're going to see here in a moment, he's going to come screaming down the field to cover that zone, but his eyes are locked in the backfield, so he misses the wide receiver slipping behind him and getting into the hole of the defense. Next up, we're going to look at how well Penn State plays this option, and keep this in mind because I have a Michigan option play to show you guys later. So the goal of the option play here is obviously the quarterback and running back are going to go to the outside. This tight end needs to seal this linebacker I have circled here. What ends up happening is that tight end tries to get to that linebacker. Is he's able to get over top of that block and get downfield to force some running back and quarterback to extend this play. The safety also comes flying up to make things difficult for the quarterback and running back as well. I just want to take a second here again to point out how well Penn State is able to fly to the ball, get hats to the ball, and that's what makes their defense so successful. The next play here, I just want to show how awesome Penn State's defensive line can be at times. This guy is going to get double teamed, and I just want to show the way he and the linebacker break through it to make an awesome stop in the backfield. So in this play here, the center and the guard are going to double team this tackle. with eyes on the backers to see who is a more vulnerable threat to breaking up the play. What ends up happening is the guard will break off to go after the outside linebacker there, but this middle linebacker is going to hesitate for a second and then follow right up behind this defensive tackle, having an open access into the backfield to make a great backfield stop here. Here I want to showcase a rare run defense mistake Penn State makes, and they allow Auburn's rusher to get the edge here, getting a couple yards and a nice gain, and just what led to that. So a simple play here by Auburn. They're sending this tight end across the formation as a decoy. This tackle is trying to set the edge, allowing the running back to get the outside. What unfortunately happens for Penn State here is the defensive end gets sealed, and this linebacker bites on the tight end coming across the formation. With Auburn running a heavy formation at the top of the screen, most of the defense is already shifted over to that side of the field, leaving a massive hole here that Penn State exposes. Last week with the Oklahoma-Texas game, we talked a lot about how Oklahoma struggled to defend the RPO against TCU. Here we're going to see a beautiful example for Penn State on how to defend it. So this is a basic play they're running. They're sending this running back on a swing pass in the RPO with a read option right here in the backfield. The key to this whole play is this defensive end right here. And again, I can't stress enough how beautifully he plays this. He stays outside, forcing the quarterback to give the ball, but just the way he plays head up against the run here, keeping his chest square, keeping the play in front of him, forcing it inside to where the rest of his defensive teammates were doing a great job getting penetration and getting a stop in the backfield. Okay, let's flip over to Michigan and their offense. Here we're going to look at the very first play of the game from the Maryland game. They got the turnover inside the 10 with the fumbled kickoff. We're going to show how they use everybody's eagerness to stop Blake Corum to set up a beautiful play-action pass on the first play. So here they're going to just fake it to Corum on the inside. This tight end is just going to run a simple corner route. The safety and this cornerback are going to bite hard on the Corum play fake and just leaves the tight end wide open in the corner of the end zone. The next play we're going to look at is worrisome for me because it shows how bad Michigan can be with blocking at their tight end position. So this play is just a simple outside sweep, and the tight end's going to come across the formation here and try and seal this edge, and as you can see, he makes a slight mistake. As you can see here, the mistake is he just missed his man. Okay, remember earlier I said to keep in mind that option play I showed you from Penn State against Purdue. This is why. This is a mistake Michigan makes on a big key option play against Iowa here. So the original play here is designed for the option to go to the right side and this tight end to climb to this middle linebacker to seal him. And then they're going to run the option off of the safety here that I have covered. What ends up happening is this safety gets sent on a blitz. The tight end is going to get confused and just pick him up anyway, allowing this middle linebacker completely free to come flying off the edge to force the play outside where his cornerbacks are doing a great job to fight off the wide receiver blocks to make a big stop in the backfield. Alrighty, the next play I'm going to show you guys is somewhere I think J.J. McCarthy can definitely improve in his game. He's great at showing patience, but there's some times where you need to show a little bit of a sense of urgency. Here, Iowa's coming with just a standard four-man rush, but it's going to get home. These two guys are looping, though, which leaves valleys or gaps where J.J. McCarthy can step up and run, like right here, or buy himself a little bit more time to find another receiver open downfield. He doesn't do that here, and he takes a sack, which is never good for your offense. He actually was able to get that pass away. That is my fault. But here, we're going to look at how Michigan does a really good job of using decoys to mislead the defense to open up gaps for the running back. Here, this tight end is going to loop inside like he's pulling, and that's going to cause this middle linebacker here to try and fill that gap. Your goal as a middle linebacker is to fill that, and that way you can any run. This outside linebacker here is going to be preoccupied, and the safety up top is going to fly over the top, and it's going to leave a huge valley here for Blake Corum to get into and have a nice run. This is actually a Donovan Edwards run. My apologies. All right, so that's our film review. That took an ungodly amount of time to put together last night because I put way too much work on myself sometimes. But yeah, so I mean, like I said, there's a lot of things Penn State defense does really well. They're one of the best in the country. There's a lot of things Michigan's offense does in the country or really well. They're one of the best in the country. But as you can see, nobody's perfect. There's a lot of areas where both teams can exploit each other. I think this is going to be a great game today. I think it's going to go back and forth, and I'm super excited to see this. But let's move on. It is time to get into our upset alerts. Nick, we'll let you go first.
Yeah, so I went with, of course, I did Michigan. For all the reasons that you just talked about, I think that Michigan has kind of lived off the hype so far of what they had last year. I'm not saying they're a bad team. I still think they're a great team. But we talked about it outside of the show after last week. Even though they've been getting wins by 11 points, 21 points, whatever, they have shown that they do have weaknesses. And the teams that they've played have picked up on those weaknesses and tried to exploit them. I think that Manny Diaz is going to do a great job of that. Obviously, James Franklin made comments about keeping Michigan behind the chains, keeping them off schedule. Michigan likes to get, a good 5-6 yards on first down, and then you got 4 or 5 yards to get on 2 plays. And when you got a running back like Blake Corum, that's very easy to do. So I think that's really the key to get them into 2nd and 10s, especially 3rd and 10s. Make McCarthy stand back there. Let your defensive line and your linebackers do what they do and get pressure, get to the quarterback, and it's going to be a very exciting game. I can't wait.
Slade?
Yeah, so my upset alert for today is going to be Clemson. I think that Clemson has been riding these close games sort of for the majority of this season so far, and I think that we kind of had all agreed at one point that them being ranked at 4 and then 5 or whatever they were at beginning of the season was very high for where their team is at, and so I think that at some point they're going to lose, and I think that is a great possibility today.
Yeah. I went with the cheap one. I went with Alabama on the road at Tennessee. I think this is, I know College Game Day is there, but I think this is going to be one of the best college football games we've seen in a long time. And that's saying a lot for some of the games we've already seen this year alone. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think the atmosphere at Knoxville is going to be off the charts. I'm super excited to watch this game later. If tickets for nosebleeds were $454, I would probably try and go, but I'm not spending that much. But I'm super excited to see this. But again, Bryce Young coming back from an injury. I think they kept him out last week just to kind of rest him. I don't want to go out on a limb and say he was still hurt or he was just taking it off because they know what this game means for their season and what this game means for Tennessee's season. Tennessee is trying to prove to everybody that they are back. That this drought since 1998 is going to be over here soon. I can't remember the last time they even beat Alabama. I think it's been 15 years, but that is probably wrong. But nonetheless, Tennessee is hungry. They want to come out. They want to get a huge win, especially at home. They got brand new goalposts built this week because they're worried about the fans storming the field. But I think Tennessee's offense, Alabama's offense, one, hasn't shown me enough this year. But two, I think their defense is a little overrated. Yeah, they've held a lot of teams to not a lot of points. The best offense they played, in my opinion, up to this point was Texas. Texas lost Quinn Ewers early. I think without that, you're talking about a completely different game there. So I still need to see more from Alabama's defense for me to completely buy into this team. I need to see their offense do a lot more, especially when Bryce Young is healthy. So until I see that, I can't put all my faith into them. So I'm going to go with Tennessee on the road. Let's move into our cash out picks for this week. But first, let's update you on the Jack Wagon Sports Top 25 rankings. We have a new number 1 this week. Ohio State jumped Alabama to get into the number 1 spot. Alabama is now number 2. Tennessee is 3, so sets up a 2 versus 3 matchup today. Georgia jumps up to number 4. Ole Miss is 5. Michigan drops all the way down to 6. James Madison is sitting at 7th. I don't think they're getting enough respect this year, but we're going to talk about them here in a minute. Texas sits at 8. Mississippi State at 9. USC 10. Clemson 11, Syracuse 12, TCU is 13th, Illinois is 14th, Tulane 15th, Oklahoma State 16th, Minnesota 17th, Penn State is 18th, Utah 19th, UCLA 20th, Kansas 21st, Oregon jumps into 22nd, so I'm happy about that. Wake Forest 23rd, Baylor 24th, and LSU is 25th. UNLV and Washington dropped out of the rankings with losses last week. So, Nick, let's go to you first. Let's get your cash out picks for today.
Yeah, so first up, kind of like you did on the upset alert, I took the cheap one on the bet. I took Tennessee.
Sorry. There's a standing.
That's all good. I took Tennessee +7. I think this is a very winnable game for Tennessee, and we've seen Alabama lose or win by less than 7 to a lot less superior teams than Tennessee. I think Tennessee +7. I don't know if that's the live line right now, but that's what it was when I put these in. Is probably one of the easiest bets of the weekend. And then I took the USC money line. USC is very quietly one of the best teams in the country. Yes, they're up there in the rankings, but they still don't get talked about like you think Bama, Georgia, Ohio State, even Michigan do. I mean, Michigan's been on Fox now, or Fox Big Noon for this is the 4th week in a row, 5th week in a row, whatever it is. Fox just keeps slobbing them off. But I think that USC is quietly one of the best teams in the country, and I think they get it done this weekend. So I'm going with their money line.
I mean, to be fair, it'd be very difficult to put USC on big noon kickoff.
Yeah, well, I understand. I wasn't saying USC specifically, but I just like to show you other teams are getting talked about a whole lot. And I think USC is a better team than Michigan.
Yeah. Real quick, Slade, before we get to you, let's go back and look at our updated standings. We have a new leader in game picks. Slade will jump Nick. He's now 47-20. Nick is 46-21. And I'm quietly bringing up the rear at 42-25. Nick still leads away with cash out at 13-9. Slade is 10-13, and I am struggling at 8-14. Slade, so let's get your cash out picks today.
Yeah, so obviously I'm going to go with Texas minus 15.5. One of you guys put it in there as a joke, but I'm riding with Texas. I'll take it. And then my other one is Mississippi State -4. I think that Mississippi State is very underrated when it comes to their offense and the production that they're able to produce. I also think Will Levis being hurt is going to drastically change this game. Whether he plays or not, I think it's going to change the momentum that Kentucky's able to produce in this game. And just going back to your picks then, Nick, I think the live is like +8.5 for Tennessee, and like 80% of the public have bet on Tennessee's spread.
Oh, yeah, if they're going to make it that big, you have to.
Yeah, and then USC is somehow the underdog in theirs right now, so it's just ridiculous right now.
Yeah, the USC one, I didn't understand why they're an underdog. I understand Utah's a tough environment to go into. Utah just hasn't shown enough this year. They've struggled to get the ball rolling. They lost early to Florida. They kind of bounced back, and then last week they lost. So I don't know. Moving on to my picks before I have a stroke. I'm going with James Madison at -11.5. James Madison is 5-0 against the spread this year. They've dominated every single team they played against. The only time they had issues this year was at Appalachian State, where they were down 28-3, and they came back and won. So I until James Madison stops beating the spread, I'm going to take them. And Kansas is +9. I understand Oklahoma's getting their quarterback back from injury, and so I get that's probably why the spread got affected a little bit. But I think 9 points is absolutely absurd for what we've seen Kansas do. I know Jalen Daniels is out, but we've also seen what Jason Bean can come in and do. You could argue he was a better throwing quarterback last week. And so I have no doubt that the Kansas offense won't really take a big step back. I think their defense is criminally underrated. Yeah, they've given up a lot of points at times, but they have made huge key stops. And Oklahoma just cannot do anything on offense right now. We talked about last week all their defensive struggles, and then we saw Texas just blow them out of the water. I don't think this is a get-right game for them, and I think Vegas doesn't like Kansas anymore just because they lost. But I'm still going to take them. I still got my boys back. So now it is time to move into our game picks. As always, so let's go ahead. Oops, I clicked the wrong thing. There we go. Okay. Got to get it figured out here this morning. Moving on, let's get into our game picks. The first game up, we have Minnesota at Illinois. Illinois being the surprise team out of the Big Ten West this year. They have one loss. This will be the 12 p.m. game on Big Ten Network. Minnesota opens as a 6.5-point favorite, though. The over/under is at 50, which I feel like is really high for a Big Ten West game. Nick, let's get your pick first.
Yeah, so I went with Minnesota on this one. And however, I do not think that that spread is fair. I think this is going to be a very close, very hard fought, typical Big Ten West game. It's going to come down to the end. We've seen Minnesota has finally shown their some of their holes that they have on their team, some of their weaknesses that they have. Obviously, Illinois has some weaknesses too, but Illinois has been playing some great football lately. This might be the most exciting Big Ten West matchup that we have this year. But I got to go with Mini.
Slade, who are you taking?
Yeah, I'm going with Illinois here. I think that this is either the second or third week in a row I'm taking them as the underdog, but they've been able to get it done. It's ridiculous what we've seen out of their offense, and like Nick had said, um, the spread here is, to me, it's kind of way off. I think this should be a field goal either way.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Illinois too. They're at home. Minnesota is reeling from that Purdue loss still. They were lost Muhammad Ibrahim. He did not play in that game. I haven't seen anything on if he'll be back this week or not. He was the leading rusher in the country before he missed that game, and then they had a bye week last week. So that definitely hurt their offense. They just could not get a 1-2 punch going. But Illinois has been really underrated on their defensive side of the ball alone. They've made some great stops. We saw last week, I understand it was Iowa, but they still held them to 6 points, which Michigan gave up more than that. But I still think this Illinois team is for real this year. They have a serious shot at winning the Big Ten West and going to the championship game a year after not even making a bowl game. I think they only won 2 conference games last year. So this is a very underrated Illinois team that is hungry. The Brett bus has left the station, and it is rolling full speed. So I'm going to take Illinois on the road.
I can't believe you threw that part in there. I think they only won 2 conference games, one of them being the longest game in college football history.
Yeah.
Hey, they
He
still
had
won.
to.
Yeah.
He had to dangle it a little bit.
Moving on, it is time to pick the Alabama at Tennessee game, and I got some special while we make our pick. So let me get that started here. But Nick, who are you taking?
Tennessee is the better team that is going onto the field tonight, today. Bama has shown their struggles. Yeah, Tennessee's not perfect, but this is the best offense that they've faced all season, and I just don't think that Bama's going to be able to slow them down enough. So Tennessee.
Slade?
Yeah, I'm going with Bama here. I'm going opposite of you guys. I think that Hooker is going to throw his first interception of the season. And I also think that Bryce Young coming back is going to be a big offensive force that really drives their team today.
I'm going with Tennessee at home. Again, I picked them from an upset alert, but I think the Tennessee offense is just too much. Again, I haven't seen enough from Bama for me to say, yeah, this is a national championship contending team. They've had way too many mistakes on both sides of the ball. Last week, they really struggled, and I understand they're missing Bryce Young, but still, it's concerning. Normally, Alabama is one of those programs that can just plug in guys and keep going. The way they struggled last week really concerns me, and so I'm going to go with Tennessee at home.
Slade's just mad that Hooker cost them $125.
Yes. Moving on to the next game, we have Oklahoma State at TCU. The huge matchup in the Big 12 that we just talked about a little bit. This will be 3:30 p.m. on ABC. TCU is a 4-point favorite, or the over/under is 68.5. Nick, who are you taking?
Yeah, I went with OK State on this one. I think it's a very close game. TCU, we've seen it against Kansas, can move the ball really well. When Dugan is on fire, he's one of the best in the country. But I think that OK State's defense is a couple steps above where Kansas's defense is. I think that this is a very important game for OK State. OK State knows that. A typical Big 12 game, you could see the over/under set at 68.5. I'd still take the over. This final score is probably going to be like 35-38 or maybe even higher than that. But yeah, I'm going OK State.
Slate?
I'm going TCU here. I think this is going to be a shootout. I think that the over-unders, would you have 68.5 there? I think that they're going to get over that, which is just ridiculous for each team to score close to 40 points in a game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State here. TCU is probably one of those teams that I should stop picking against, but Oklahoma State is my Big 12 championship pick. So I can't go against them yet until they show me. Yeah, they have a lot of question marks on the defensive side of the ball. It's probably one of the worst in the FBS. But TCU, again, has struggled a lot on defense as well. Outside of that Oklahoma game, they gave up 31 points to Kansas last week. It should have been more than that. So until Oklahoma State proves to me that they can't do it, I'm still going to take my Big 12 championship pick. Moving over to the ACC, we have NC State visiting Syracuse. This will be 3:30 p.m. on the ACC network. Syracuse opens as a 3.5-point favorite at home. The over/under is at 42. Nick, who are you going to take?
Yeah, so I'm going with NC State in this one. Again, kind of the theme this week. I think this is another close game, or could be another close game. I have no disrespect for Syracuse. We've talked about them a couple times on the show. I just think at this point in the season, NC State now has zero pressure on them. They realize that any hopes of whatever they thought they were going to do at the beginning of the season is gone. They can go out, they can play freely, and this is the biggest test that I think Syracuse has faced this season. It's going to be a great matchup. I think NC State's going to squeak one out on the road.
Slade?
Yeah, so I'm going with Syracuse here. Originally, I was on NC State with Nick, but like I told you before the show, George, I didn't realize that NC State's quarterback was not going to be possibly playing this week because of injury last week. So I just think that Syracuse at home is going to be able to get the win.
I'm going to go with Syracuse as well for the simple fact that NC State's offense is horrible to watch at times. Their defense is really, really good, and so is Syracuse. But Syracuse has a great offense when they want to play offense. They can put up a lot of points in a hurry. I think it's just going to be a little bit too much for NC State. And I'm actually going to disagree with you, Nick, on the playing freely. I think they're still playing as hard as they can because they know if Clemson loses one game or if they lose the second game, that they still have a shot at the ACC championship game. But I think Syracuse is just too much. And a surprising Syracuse, I believe they're 5-0, so they're trying to be 6-0. Moving over to the SEC, we have Mississippi State visiting Kentucky. This will be 7:30 p.m. on the SEC network. Mississippi State is a 4-point favorite right now. The over/under is 49. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I went Mississippi State on this. I think, I think even with Will Levis in the game, I think that Mississippi State is still the better team. I mean, Kentucky is a great team this year, but Mississippi State has, I don't want to necessarily say come out of nowhere because we thought that they were going to be at least a good team, but they've really put it together. They've put their best product on the field week in and week out. Yes, they have holes like everybody else does, but this is a Mississippi State team that is going to be tough to play no matter who you are. Obviously, Will Levis possibly either A, not being in the game, or B, not being at 100% in the game is huge to Kentucky. That offense relies on him and his ability to move the ball around and make the plays that need to be made. So yeah, I got to go Mississippi State.
Slade?
Yeah, I'm going with Mississippi State as well. Stroke. I think the fact that Rodgers has thrown for 22 touchdowns on the season already is just ridiculous. When you look at like any of the other quarterbacks, like it's like, oh, they threw like 10 to 15, and this dude's just like out there on a limb by himself, 22 touchdowns, which is just crazy.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Mississippi State as well. Again, there's a lot of questions surrounding Kentucky. They lost a home game to South Carolina last week, which is very surprising after the Mark Stoops talked a lot of crap about Shane Beamer. So I think the Kentucky team is reeling. There's question marks around Will Levis this week and if he's going to be 100% healthy. But I think Mississippi State is just rolling too much right now. Mike Leach has that offense in great position. They are going to put up a lot of points. I think the over/under is way too low for a Mississippi State game right now. But I'm going to take Mississippi State on the road, making it surprising we got this far with our picks, making that the first Jack Wagon Sports Jinx alert. Next game up, we have USC visiting Utah. This game is going to go a long way in deciding who's going to make the Pac-12 championship game at the end of the season. This will be 8 p.m. on Fox. Utah opens as a 3.5-point favorite. The over/under is 65. Nick, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, so I talked about them a little earlier. I got to go USC here. I think they're one of the best teams in the country. They keep getting, again, I don't want to say slept on because we do talk about them, but not to the level we talk about other teams, and I think they might be up there. This offense is amazing. I think Utah has just struggled too much. I don't know if we talked about it on the show or if we were outside of the show when we talked about it, but Cam Rising, especially the Cam Rising we seen at the end of the season last year, tear up Oregon. Sorry, George, twice, and he hasn't been here this season. We've seen flashes of that, but we have not seen the consistent Cam Rising. I think a consistent Cam Rising is one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, but the Cam Rising that we have this year, that's on and off, and depends on how he's feeling, what mood he's in. I just don't think that he's good enough to lead the team past this USC team.
Slade?
Yeah, so I went with USC also, and just to talk about how we had said the line was kind of weird earlier. I guess the reasoning as to why they have Utah as the favorite is because Utah just waxed Oregon State 2 weeks ago, and USC only had a 3 point
I
win.
really thought you were
So
going to stop after Oregon. I was going to like, seriously, it's been a year.
no.
I'm going to go with USC as well. Until Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley show me that they can't do great things with that offense, I'm going to believe in them, at least until they play Oregon. But yeah, like I said, I think with Caleb Williams controlling that offense, it's one of the best offenses in the country. They do have question marks on the defensive side of the ball from time to time, but I think Utah just has way too many more. That's not a phrase, but way too many question marks on from their team. I'm going to stop talking now. Next up, we have Ohio visiting Western Michigan in a battle for the MAC. We love some action here. This will be 3:30 p.m. on CBS Sports Network.
You put this game in there just to say that, didn't you?
I did. Ohio is a 1-point favorite. The over/under is at 58.5. Nick, who are you taking?
Yeah, I went with Western Michigan on this one. I think this is a very the spread obviously shows spread sitting at -1 for Ohio. These are very two evenly matched teams. As far as I'm not even going to say it, MAC action goes. I think that this could be the game of the season in the MAC. It should be entertaining. The over under set at 58.5. It might go over that. Both of these teams have good offenses, not so much on the defensive side. But I got to go Western Michigan.
Slade?
I went with Ohio here. I don't really know either of these teams. I don't watch them, so I just figured I'd go with Ohio.
He just wants it to look better on Penn State's records. He's like, I'm going Ohio.
I'm going to go with Ohio. This is the only team I've watched this year, but I do know that Western Michigan got blown out last week at home. I think this is Ohio team on the comeback. They've had a rough start to their season. They're still definitely in competition to win the MAC, or at least their division in the MAC to make the conference championship game. And I think Western Michigan's just reeling too much from that loss last week. Moving over to the ACC, we have UNC visiting Duke in the battle for the Victory Bell. Just like basketball, I think Duke's going to win this, but this is 8 p.m. on the ACC Network. UNC is a 7-point favorite. The over/under is 67.5. Nick, who do you got?
Yeah, so I got to go with my boys from UNC. I got the hat on; it's backwards, you can't see it. But I think that Drake May is just too good. I don't, we talked about back in Duke Kansas game how Duke was kind of on the same level as Kansas, and really since that game and during that game, we found out that they weren't. I don't think that UNC is on the level of Kansas either, but I think Drake May is going to be able to tear apart that Duke defense. UNC's defense is probably going to let Duke score some points, but this is a tough. When this offense on the UNC side is going, it is a very hard offense to stop.
Slade?
Yeah, so I went with UNC also. Like Nick had said, Drake May, he has been ridiculous this season. Another person that's in the 20s in touchdowns, which is astonishing to see. Obviously, half of those came in the first 2 games of the season, one against FAMU and the other against App State in that crazy game that we saw. So, yeah, I'm just going with UNC.
I'm going to go with UNC as well. Their defense is horrible, but they have one of the best offenses in the country. In our Jack Wagon Sports poll, they're currently 27th, so they definitely have a good team. If they could do some things on defense, that would be great. I don't know what Gene Chiswick is doing out there. But, yeah, I'm going to take UNC on the road. And moving on, it is the Battle of Enchantment in New Mexico. I think this is going to be game of the week. This is my pick. We have New Mexico at New Mexico State. This will be 8 p.m. It's not even going to be on TV. New Mexico opens as a 6.5-point favorite. The over/under is 37.5. Looks like an Iowa score. Nick, who are you taking?
Yeah, I went with New Mexico on this one. Kind of like Slade on the Western Michigan Ohio pick. I don't know a whole lot about these teams, so this one I actually flipped the coin on. and happened to land on New Mexico, so that's who we went with.
Slade?
I went with New Mexico also. I thought that this was a joke that you put this in there, and then I just looked at both quarterbacks. Each have thrown 6 interceptions on the season, and I was like, "Well, the New Mexico quarterback threw 3 touchdowns to the other dude's 2 touchdowns, so I'll go with them."
That's the difference maker right there.
Yeah. I'm going with New Mexico as well. There's not a whole lot I can say about either of these teams. But we had to mix up our picks once in a while. We can't pick the same
Okay.
teams every week. But I am excited for the Battle of Enchantment. I think it's going to be an enchanting matchup.
It's gonna be enchanting. Well, thank
Yeah,
God
like
it's not on
something
TV
from
because it'd
Frozen.
be enchanting to turn it off. But
So it
I
is
gotta
time now.
rather watch Frozen than that game.
It is time now for the Jack Wagon Sports Game of the Week.
Daytime better call the bet. Ain't playing at your best, then you will get left. If it don't involve money, then I don't accept. If it don't involve money, then I don't accept. Roll those up, like this. Daytime better call the bet. Ain't playing at your best, then you will get left. If it don't involve
I think I could have made the music a little bit louder.
a little bit. Hey, it gets
But-
people going. I'm here for it. Every week, the music along with that video gets better, so I'm here. Eventually, it's just gonna come back from that video, and we're just gonna be in a straight rave, looking like the Pat McAfee show, just absolutely going off.
But I know who you two are taking, but I want to hear why you're taking State.
Yeah, so I went with Penn State. Obviously, yes, they're my team. But I think that this is a very good matchup for Penn State. I think that Michigan is a tad overrated. Like I said, we've seen some of the holes and some of the weaknesses they have. Blake Corum's averaging like 122.5 yards per game, I think, which isn't like it. The thing about the Michigan offense, like you talked about earlier, they're a very efficient offense. They're not going to necessarily dazzle you with 70-yard bombs or huge runs, but they play the game efficiently. And it's going to, like I said earlier, it's going to be important for our defense to keep them behind the chains, keep them off keep them off schedule. And on the offensive side of the ball for us, Sean Clifford just has to not be dumb, make the right reads. When you see a guy open, throw the ball, don't hold it, don't hesitate. If you got to use your legs, use your legs. This Michigan defense is, in my opinion, isn't as stout as what they were last year. So we can definitely take advantage of what they're going to give us. But that's the thing, Sean Clifford's going to have to take what they give him and don't try to force anything.
Slade?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going with Penn State also. I think the spread should be a lot closer. I think it should be at 3.5. I think that that's not because of Michigan being that bad at defense or Penn State being that bad at offense, but more or less that the rivalry, it should be the score closer. And I think that Penn State really has a good chance at winning this game and then playing Ohio State for the big noon game in a couple weeks.
As long
I'm
as it's
going-
not Michigan again.
I'm going with Michigan. You guys are going to hear this song a lot today. But no, I think this is going to be a really good game. For me, it comes down to Clifford, like you just said. I think all he has to do is play like he did against Auburn, right? He doesn't need to be flashy. He just needs to not make the mistakes. But for me, it comes down to Penn State's passing defense. They rank 103rd in the country. They're not very good on pass defense, which is very contrary to their rush defense. This is going to be J.J. McCarthy's game where he needs to step up and show that Coach Harbaugh made the right decision in giving him the keys to this offense. I think Blake Corum has a decent day. I don't think he's going to run all over him like we've seen in the past few weeks with other opponents. But like I just said, I think it comes down to the quarterback battle between J.J. McCarthy and Sean Clifford. And with that aspect alone, I have to give Michigan the slight advantage. But again, I think 7 points is a little generous for a spread. I think it's going to be closer than that. And I'm also just trying to be nice to you guys and not jinx Penn State. But hey, every time I picked against them, they picked up a win.
Also today is the maze out for them, and
Yeah.
all of the Penn State fans were instructed to wear white to see who all shows up to the game.
And I just
Uh,
want to say, you mentioned the pass defense. Would you say 113?
103.
103. So I think that might be a little skewed because you think about it. A lot of people don't want to run against our run defense. You have PJ Mustipher stuffing up the inside, but we also have at least before us going into the bye week, we had the top 2 corners in pass breakups in Joey Porter Jr. and Caleb King or Cole King. I always get it mixed up. One's a linebacker, one's a cornerback. But yeah, in the nation, top 2 in pass breakups. We have a good secondary, but teams would rather take those short throws that they can get, those slants, whatever, rather than trying to run against PJ Mustipher. Those 2 corners do a good job tackling on the outside too. So I think that might be a little skewed, but I do appreciate you picking Michigan to avoid the jinx.
I mean, I will say this: I had to cut the film down from like 15 minutes to 6 last night, and there was a lot of Penn State miscues in the pass defense. I'll just say.
I didn't say we were perfect. But I said we're a little skewed.
So it's going to be an exciting day of college football today. Very excited for it to get started. Hope you guys enjoy it as well. We said this on our podcast the other day. We want to get your guys' thoughts on about doing a later start time. Today we did it because Slade had to work late and Nick had some issues. So we just want to get your guys' thoughts on should we start this later and so on. So let us know what you guys think about that. I did want to give a shout out to Paxton who made his pick. He picked Penn State. I'm not sure he could say that word, but Jen said he did. So maybe that was his first word is he picked Penn State. But it's going to be a great day of college football. We have a lot of ranked matchups. Every time slot today has a great matchup, so I am excited to not have to leave my couch all day. Hannah's going to a girls' night to watch movies, so I am not being bothered. So I'm excited. But it's going to be a fun day. Go enjoy it. Go watch a lot of college football. And we will be back here next week for another edition of Out of the Tunnel for Week 8. I can't believe we're already that far into the season. So make sure you guys are here for that. I think that's all we got. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube. Turn your notifications on so that way you guys know when we go live every Saturday. If your friends wanted to watch this and you missed it, you can still share it with them and they can still watch it after the fact. That would greatly help us out. So make sure you share it as well. And we'll see you guys next week.
See
you.